What's going on, Ant Crew? My name is Andrew. Welcome back to a brand new exciting video. I always try to get Saki in at least some of my videos to say what's up. You guys hear that purring? Ooh, hey buddy. Alright, be free, Saki. Woo. That's not a great place for you to settle in. Thank you. Anyways, guys, a few weeks ago, I asked you to send me some of your footage for me to edit. I'd recently saw Peter Mckinnon's Editing Your Photos video, and I thought I would do something similar, except this time with videos. So just full disclaimer, I am 100% ripping off Peter McKinnon. Yes, it is true. No, but seriously, I did originally get the idea for this format of a video from Peter McKinnon, although it's slightly different. We're doing something a little bit different where I edit your videos instead of your photos. I just want to say real quick, huge thank you to everyone who was nice enough to send in some of your footage. It's honestly like a lot more work to actually take the time to send in some footage, because usually you have to send it through Google Drive and stuff like that, and it's just a bit of a pain. So thank you so much to everyone who sent in some videos. Sorry I couldn't get to everyone, so we're just doing 5 different clips today, but I really do appreciate it. The second thing I did want to mention before we jump into it is that editing is super subjective, especially when I'm editing videos and there's really no context of what the video is about or anything like that. It's just kind of weird, but it's so subjective. So if you guys disagree with me or anything like that, then just comment down below and let me know why. I'm always down to learn and start a dialogue with you guys about your personal opinions about editing and everything like that. And without further ado, guys, let's jump on the computer and start talking about these videos. Alright, so the first video came in courtesy of Dawson Voss. Thank you so much for sending in this clip, and it's a super cool backflip, like in the snow and everything like that. The one thing I was thinking about was like, it's kind of sketchy doing a backflip off of ice. Like personally, I would be afraid of slipping, but he managed to pull it off. It looked super cool. So the first thing I noticed with this clip is that I think it was most likely shot on an iPhone, just by the way that it looks. That's what I'm guessing, or at least some kind of smartphone. The first thing I wanted to do is add some background separation. As you guys can see right now, pretty much everything was in focus that was inside of the frame, most likely because it was shot on a phone. So I went ahead and added Mocha to this layer, added into Mocha Pro, and started doing what's called ragdoll rotoscoping. Ragdoll rotoscoping is when you're masking out something that has like a lot of moving individual parts. So I'm trying to mask out this body, and what I could do is draw like a mask all the way around the body, the arms, the legs, the head, and everything. Or what I could do is break it down by joints. So instead of masking out his whole arm, I could break it down at the elbow. So I just mask out this part of the arm, then the upper part of the arm. The reason people do that is because when you work with joints, there's usually 2 variants of motion. You have the actual arm moving itself, and then you could have sort of a sub motion of the elbow extending. So the arm could be moving up and extending at the same time, which makes it really difficult to mask. By breaking it down sort of by joint, roughly, it makes it way easier to mask. So I did my best masking it. I added it onto this solid layer and used that as an alpha matte layer. Then I headed down to my base clip and I used the camera lens blur effect. This is by far the best blur inside of After Effects. Be warned, it's gonna hurt your computer, but it's worth it. And I just made the actual strength of the blur only about 3%. I thought that was a good balance because I thought it wasn't like overdoing it too much. And the other thing was I did mess up a lot of the rotoscoping, but that way by using sort of a low blur percentage, it sort of just blends in with the edges and you can't really notice it. And then I wanted to add some foreground leave elements to sort of vignette the backflip a little bit and direct the eye to where we wanted it to look. So I went ahead and took this footage of some leaves that I gotten a while back. I did a garbage mask around the leaves and then used the Luma key to key out everything but the leaves. I then blurred it up with Gaussian blur because I didn't need it to look like real camera lens blur, and then I just slapped it in there and color corrected it to help it blend in a little bit more. After that, I went ahead and color graded everything. I color grade with the Red Giant's Colorista. It's a plugin for After Effects and Premiere Pro, and it's just my color grading panel of choice. I messed around with some greens and the highlights and everything like that. Did a tiny little S-curve in the curves and just sort of try to give it that winter sort of feel. After that, I messed around with some vignetting, and then I also used a Red Giant plugin from Universe where I just added some slight little camera shake back and forth to sort of tie everything together. And that was about it for this clip. So here is the before and here's the after. So that was all I did for the first video. Thank you so much, Dawson, for sending in your clips. The next clip comes from like the worst person ever, Aiden Robbins. He says, "Huge fan, my guy. If you don't use this, I plan to terminate my subscription promptly. Best of luck." Aiden is one of those fans who just like DMs me every single day, and it just gets so old. Probably the worst editor I know personally. I hate his videos. I turn on post notifications just to dislike them as soon as I get that notification, but I decided to take the time to edit his clip. because he's kind of my boy. So I love this footage. It was shot in some kind of flat profile. It looks super good. The first thing I did inside of Premiere Pro was I thought this just had that cinematic feel, so I changed the aspect ratio to 2:3:5. The next thing I did was just warp stabilize it to get rid of a couple of those wobbles, and then the next thing I did was I added a solid layer and I added the optical flares plugin, and then I messed around with a few different options of different kinds of lens flares, and eventually I ended up going with this subtle little glint just to add a little bit more to the lens flare. There was already a bit of a lens flare already in the video. I just once again wanted to dramatize it a bit. So what I did is I duplicated this base layer. I drew a rough mask around the general area of the light rays, and then I added the curves effect, bumped up sort of just the overall midtones. After that, I just sort of did like a basic mask track, and it came out looking really sick. After that, I went ahead and duplicated it a couple times, messed around with it a bit more. I eventually made another one in this corner right here, add in some more light rays right there. After that, I added an adjustment layer. I pushed a lot of blue into the shadows and then a lot of orange into the highlights, and then I did a bit of a contrast S-curve inside of the curves and messed a little bit around with adding some red back into the midtones / highlights. And that's pretty much all I did for this shot. I think it turned out pretty sick, and I feel like it sort of got this like Lord of the Rings vibe. Like I could totally imagine just like an elf standing in one of those light rays. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. But yeah, I think it turned out pretty nice. Here is the before shot, and here is the after. Shout out to my boy Aiden Robbins, you already know, and that's about it. Alright, so the next shot's coming courtesy of Kafia Chowdhury or something like that. I'm so sorry, I'm positive that I'm butchering your name, but thank you so much for sending in these shots. They're straight off your SD card, which I really appreciate. And he said that he got them on a trip last summer, and it looks like a really cool trip. Next time you go, invite me. So he sent me a couple different options, but the one I ended up going with was this sort of slight panning across the sky with these hot air balloons. Super cool. So the first thing I did is I just messed around with the speeds and everything like that. I did change this to the 2:3:5 aspect ratio because once again, sort of had that cinematic feel. And then once I was inside of After Effects, I went ahead and 3D tracked the layer. And what I wanted to do was just add in a few more hot air balloons. I thought it would be super easy to do. So I went ahead and took this one hot air balloon, not too far in the back, but not too far close either. And the other thing was the sun wasn't sort of shining on the side. It was pretty much a silhouette. And then I did a garbage mat around it. I added the Luma key effect, and then I was having trouble actually seeing it, like what I was keying out. So a really useful tip for trying to get like accurate keys is to go down to this RGB button, select that, and then select alpha. And then when you bring up the threshold of the Luma, everything that is white is going to be visible, and that way I had a better idea of what I was actually keying out. Once I did that, I freeze framed it so that it wasn't going to move, and then I made it a 3D layer, parented it to the null 1, and then I just repositioned it inside of the frame. After that, I duplicated a few more times and just moved all of them over in a few different places, just moving it inside of the 3D space, and I just added a few, not too many. I didn't go overboard. I might have been able to add a couple more if I really wanted to, but I wanted it to look realistic. I think if there's just like a swarm of hot air balloons, it would look pretty unrealistic, so I tried to hold back a bit. Oh, and then one thing that's super important that I forgot to mention is I used the curves to sort of haze up the ones in the background. As you guys can see in the beginning, it was too black, too dark, and if it was actually that far back in real life, it would be sort of hazed up by the clouds. So I just used the curves to sort of haze them up a bit. I messed around with this turbulent noise. If you add the turbulent noise effect to like a solid layer, and then you go to fractal type and change it to cloudy, you can sort of make some clouds. So I made some clouds, scaled it up, and then masked it out and feathered it a ton. In the end, I don't know if it was really that great of an idea. I don't think it necessarily added anything. I think I came from a good place. It just didn't really come to fruition quite the way that I expected, but that's okay. I think it sort of added a nice gradient. And then the last thing I did was, once again, I added some optical flares, messed around with this a ton. I ended up having to go into Mocha Pro, tracking the sun, exporting that track data to another null, and then I pick whipped the position XY for the optical flare, and that way it tracked along with the sun. I tried to keep it subtle, but I think it added just a little bit there. And then the last thing that I did was I color graded a bit. Once again, color grading inside of Colorista. In the highlights, I bumped in some orange. In the midtones and shadows, I pulled in some blue. And then down in the curves, once again, I added a slight S-curve, making sure I tried not to bump up the highlights too much. And that was about it for the color grading. Pretty simple. Honestly, that was about it for this clip. So here is the before, and here is the after. Such a great clip. I love when clips like this just sort of lend themselves to different effects. Thank you so much for sending it in, and let's move on. Alright, so this next clip comes in courtesy of Jordan Pernot. Thank you so much for sending in your clip, and this shot is straight up like BBC, Planet Earth, National Geographic. Looks so good. It's this elephant just chilling in the water, looking like he's having a great time. I kind of want to join him, and yeah, it's a great shot. Not a whole lot I had to do. In Premiere Pro, I went ahead and changed the sequence settings again to 235. After that, the shot I noticed was shot in 120 frames per second, so I slowed this clip down. Love that 120 FPS, and then I messed around with some time remapping, and I just sort of start off with him just sort of like flipping his trunk up like that, which looks super cool, and then we speed up to a little bit later on in the shot, which is actually my favorite part, which is where he's sort of panning through the trees, and then right here we just sort of get this glimpse through the branches of the elephant doing his thing, and I just really like the composition of the leaves around his head. It looked really nice in that 120 FPS, just a really nice shot. So after I did that time remapping, I went ahead and did a little bit of color grading once again in Colorista, messed around with those color wheels a bit, just adding in some blue and stuff like that, and then the main thing was I messed around in the curves, just adding a bit more green into the midtones, and that was about it for this shot. So here is the before, and here is the after. This next and final clip is sent in courtesy of Ethan Stewart. Thank you so much, Ethan, for sending it in, and it is like straight up ninja level. This dude is doing this two-step wall backflip off of this tree. So cool. And I really just messed around with this clip and had some fun. So we tried out a few different things. First thing is I wanted to sort of just change the sky. I wanted to do a sky replacement. The issue I knew I was going to encounter was these trees. So what I ended up doing is dragging in this raw photo of this sunrise, scaling it up to match the background, and then I duplicated the base clip, dragged it up on top, and then I changed the track matte of the photo to Luma and turned off the bottom clip. So that way we sort of got this silhouette of him doing the backflip off of this tree that takes care of all the edges of the trees and everything for the most part. Looks pretty good. The other thing I wanted to do is this frame right here makes him straight up look like he's levitating, and it's so cool, so I wanted to slow it down. Now the shot I noticed was shot in 4K, but it was only 30 frames per second, so I went ahead and used an effect built into After Effects called Time Warp. Time Warp is similar to Optical Flow for all of my Final Cut Pro users, and it's also similar to Twixtor. So essentially what it does is it adds in extra frames, recreates them artificially based on the movement in the clip, and tries essentially to slow down shots that weren't shot in high frame rates. So I added in a few different keyframes here, just had to go down to like super slow motion for a few frames, and then I converted all those keyframes to easy ease, headed into the graph editor, and just sort of smoothed them up a bit. I messed around with maybe adding some like chromatic aberration from the Red Giant Universe pack, but I decided not to. I thought it was a little bit overboard, so I ended up just going with this. The last thing that I did is I added in the camera, and I added in some sort of scaling in the beginning, and then I had the scaling stop as soon as the slow motion hit the clip. And that was about it for this clip. I did a bit of color grading, but nothing too special. Had a bunch of fun with it. Once again, such a cool shot of him doing this backflip on the tree. So impressive. Wish I could do that. Here is the before, and here's the after. And that's about it. That was our fifth and final shot for this video. So there we have it. I have to grab a drink because my mouth is so dry from talking so much. I'll be right back. Ooh. Alright, so there we have it, guys. That is it for my editing your footage video. Huge thank you to everyone who sent in clips. Sorry I couldn't get to everybody's videos, but thank you so much to everyone who sent in any footage at all. I'm definitely thinking about potentially doing more of these if you guys want, so let me know in the comments down below. It's almost 3 in the morning right now when I'm finishing this video, so I need to wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Get outside, film a video, make a difference, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.